Hey everybody, this is Nate Smoyer, and you're listening to the Tech Nest Podcast. This is the show where we sit down with the leaders in real estate and technology to find out what they're doing to transform the way we buy, sell, and invest in real estate. If you've got an interest in real estate and technology, stick around. You're in the right place. All right, we got a great show for you today. We are interviewing the CEO and founder of a company called Reonomy. We got Rich Sarkis. Now, if you remember, Reonomy was on the TechNest podcast some time ago, and we were talking to their former head of marketing. And we use this episode really to both catch up on where Reonomy is at today, where they've gone, but also where they're going. And I thought this was a phenomenal interview with Rich. Of course, we talk about what does Reonomy do? How do they help people in the commercial real estate space? They make data cool, as far as I'm concerned. That's how I look at it. They make data cool. They make it accessible. So take all the information about your commercial real estate from city to city to city. It's got all different types of, the cities structure it differently, and the mortgage notes are structured differently, and the codes are structured differently. And then they make that data usable and comparable. But we go more than just the data and the product talk into this. One of the things Rich mentioned was the importance of putting the customer at the center of what you do, and how that has helped shape business decisions, design decisions, product development decisions. We talk about their branding and marketing. There's not, in my opinion, there's not a lot of data companies that look really cool, or it's very difficult, I should say, to make a data company look really cool. And last but not least, Of course, I think a lot of people wonder about this, and this is a really interesting time to be talking about fundraising. We talk about, what Reonomy has been able to raise, over $120-some million. Their Series D closed late 2019. But what was so fascinating was when I asked Rich about this, he said they hadn't even spent their Series C when they raised their Series D. And he shares why that is. So if you want to hear the answers to that, of course, you're going to have to listen to the episode. So I hope you've got a little bit of time. Sit back, enjoy the show. Well, hey, Rich, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be on.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you back. You are now only the second company to get 2 features.
Wow,
on
that's an honor.
TechNest podcast. So good for you guys. Hey, let's start the show correctly here. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Rich Sarkis, and I'm the CEO of a company called Reonomy, which I founded about 8 years ago now.
All right. And Reonomy, as I mentioned, was on the show previously. We had Sam, who was your head of marketing. Great guy, super intelligent, really smart guy. And I mentioned to you in the pre-show here, I've admired Reonomy a little bit from a distance. I'm not a customer, but it's because you guys kind of do something that's a little bit nerdy. If it's okay, I say that.
It's okay. We embrace the nerdiness.
But it's cool. I think it's cool. It's always looked cool. And it's
nerdy chic.
Nerdy chic.
Exactly.
Boom. That's the new prop tech, by the way, because Beckerman said it's dead. The new prop tech is nerdy chic. There it is, folks. All right, let's get right into it. So for those who aren't familiar with Reonomy, what's the big problem that Reonomy solves?
So when we first started, the big our first product was solving was a pretty simple one that resonates with a lot of people in general, and definitely resonates with people in commercial real estate, which is, how do I make more money faster? Full stop, right? And that's really what we boiled it down to and distilled it. And we figured out that if you're a broker, if you're a loan originator at a bank, if you're an investor or developer, it doesn't really matter what the various sort of angles or use cases, whether you're on the debt or equity side of the transaction, or if you're just facilitating a transaction. Essentially what you're trying to do, when it just all boils down to it and you're just honest with yourself, is you're trying to make more money faster. So we built a web-based application that allows those 3 main groups, but others as well, to make more money faster. That was the first use case, which has since evolved into many other use cases, but that remains a very strong core component of what we do.
Yeah, and then practically, walk me through some of the use cases in which people would leverage Reonomy to make more money faster.
Yeah, and again, this is for the web app. I'll talk a little bit about how large enterprises at this point, large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies are leveraging our data and our analytics, which came about 2 or 3 years ago. So after a number of years of R&D, but essentially for our core product, you can think of that product. It's a web-based application, as I mentioned. The easiest way to think about it is like a Zillow for commercial real estate. So you and I would go to Zillow to find your dream home in a Chicago neighborhood, or mine, in Westchester County or whatever. We put all our parameters, how big we want it, all that stuff, and it would sift through. And to your point, Zillow actually does a lot of nerdy stuff on the background. It's going through all the MLS data, other data sets, tax assessor, crunching all of that, and then saying, okay, here are the 3 dream homes that you should look at. And you can click on each of them and really drill down. That really didn't exist in a ubiquitous way for anything that's not a single family home. So literally duplex and above, and all your other food groups, retail, warehouse, office, vacant land even. How do you, if you're a developer, find the 5 contiguous tax lots in Boise, Idaho, that you can then assemble and build a strip mall, right? That's a really hard thing to do. That would take weeks or months of ferreting through public sources, talking to brokers, literally canvassing on foot. And what Reonomy allows our users to do is do that type of search and exploration from the comfort of their desktop or mobile if they happen to be on the field. And so one specific use case maybe to just make it even more concrete is if I'm a loan originator at JP Morgan or Wells Fargo, and my job is to find owners and their properties who are in that refinancing window, right? They've got a 5-year loan, a 10-year loan, doesn't really matter, or they took out a loan within a specific window. I want to get them on the phone or contact via email. Increasingly, digital is an important medium of marketing, or even snail mail. That we've found that a lot of people want to use old-fashioned mail. But I want to get your attention as the owner who's in that refinancing window so that you refinance your loan with me. That's how I get paid as a loan originator. That's how JP Morgan or Wells Fargo makes money. And that's frankly how the owner benefits to take out some equity or refi with a lower rate.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with some of the products that do exist of like, hey, we'll help you find the properties off market and send your letters and that sort of thing. But you guys have gone beyond the scope of just an investor who's just looking for that next quick flip or
right, the listed property that's for sale and all that stuff. Yeah, that's a very narrow universe.
Right. Now, but in doing this with commercial, you said it hadn't really existed prior to Reonomy. What makes commercial difficult?
Yeah, well, specifically what hadn't existed, because there's always been these sort of top of pyramid point solutions for the biggest asset classes in the biggest markets, and you could find research around that. But what if you wanted information on a triplex or a duplex, as I mentioned, in a secondary or tertiary market, right? Or in Boise, Idaho. Again, I don't want to pick on Boise, Idaho, but I've always got it in my mind.
We can pick on Boise. I mean, I've got a few that I could rattle off, but I like Boise.
Yeah, exactly. And so what makes it challenging is that when you zoom out across the US, you're talking about 3,000 different counties, a little over than that actually, over 20,000 municipalities. Each one has its own data ontology or data model, right? And so you've got to find a way to link and connect all of that data, supplement it with other third-party data from title companies, credit rating agencies, geospatial databases, and those data sets are sort of coming up more and more, right? Mobile location data, traffic data, crime data, census data. Census, is about to come out, hopefully, in 2020. And so you need a system, and you can't really brute force it when you really want to cover all the assets because it's 50 million. Whereas if you're only focusing on one market and one type of asset, you can sort of brute force it with hundreds, if not thousands of people sort of combing through that manually. But if you want to do it at a ubiquitous level nationwide, literally like the Zillow for commercial real estate, you need technology to do that for you. And that's what we were able to do.
And what you're saying, like even like within one county, township to township, there could be things that like what a zoning actually means.
I'll give you a concrete example. A concrete example. And this is one that we got very wrong initially. This was our oh shit moment, pardon my French. Right. So we
I like this. Top of the show. We're going for an OS. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, it's a pandemic. You can say what you want these days. You dress how you want. You say what you want. And so we started in New York, and we built that product that I was mentioning across the 5 boroughs. And we sort of, we said we used AI and machine learning, but we didn't. It was marketing. It was razzmatazz, right? What we really had, we had tech, but it was all rules-based, right? These were literally rules that I sat down with our early developer and developers and said, okay, well, if a mortgage is filed in this sequence, you add them all up, and it's likely a construction loan. If you see this kind of thing in the document, then you just take the last one, and that's going to be the amount of debt. And it worked really well in New York, and full of confidence, and I would say bravado. We're like, okay, well, let's bring on more capital.
And the standard line of thought here is if it can work in New York, you should be able to do it anywhere.
Right? If you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere, right?
Right, yeah.
And so, yes, the standard line of thought was we can copy paste what we've done in New York. Works really well there, and it's a big market. Let's copy paste it to the second largest market. And we even got a round of funding from Bain Capital around that thesis. And that's where the wheels came off the bus, right? That was the OS moment, as I mentioned. And the reason is when you actually double click on LA County is actually made up of over 80 different cities and municipalities. Okay, Beverly Hills, Encino, Calabasas, Malibu. The list goes on and on and on, over 80 of them. Wow. And to make matters worse, each one of them records data and structures data differently. So a mortgage document in Encino looks and feels and is structured differently than a mortgage document in Calabasas is different than one in Santa Monica, in downtown LA, etc. So that's where our approach in New York, needless to say, didn't really work. And we had a little bit of an existential crisis. This is going back, 6 or so years now, where we had to retrench as a company because we had sort of gotten ahead of our skis, right? Because we were very confident that what worked, as you said, in New York, why wouldn't it work in LA, and then San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, Miami, everywhere in between. But we were very wrong. So we had to go back to the drawing board. And that's where we, for the first time, truly leveraged machine learning and AI to build a purpose custom-built system that could resolve any record in a public or private data set to a unified common ID. And that sounds like, again, somewhat nerdy, but somewhat simple.
I can't imagine why that's not listed on your homepage.
Right, exactly. Exactly, right? And really the easiest way to think about that is how do we know that this Rich Sarkis is not the same as this other Rich Sarkis? Well, in the US, we have something called the social security number, right?
Right. This is the Tupacs Shakur. Are you following this?
No, I'm not.
There's a guy in, was it Kentucky? I think it's Kentucky. Okay. His real name is Tupac Shakur. And the governor, someone accused him of faking his name for
really
receiving benefits. And he's like, hey, whoa, it's my real name, And then the governor apologized and he said, no worries. I know you've got a lot going on right now. But
hilarious.
Yeah, if there's two Tupacs, you need to figure out who's who.
That's hilarious. I warn you, somebody might knock and now nobody's there. I'm just going to real quick, open the door.
Okay.
Okay, I open it for you. I am right back. Sorry.
It's okay. You're all good.
We'll magic that one away, or it'll be a COVID moment.
No, we'll cut that out.
That's amazing on the Tupac thing.
It is. It was trending along with Ross Perot this morning.
So basically that's the gist of it, right? You need a unique identifier that can disambiguate this building from that building in that market. And initially we said, well, that's going to be easy. We'll just use the address, the parcel number, lat long or something, but that didn't really work. So we had to create our own. We didn't creatively, this is where marketing and branding sort of failed us. We called it the Reonomy ID and said, oh, we'll come up with a cool acronym later. We never did. It's still called the Reonomy ID. And we had a funny story on that. We actually thought, oh, well, let's do the Re-ID, right? Real estate ID, Reonomy ID. And then we go to reid.com. And it's a advanced police interrogation technique that's been patented around how to get people to confess their crimes. So I'm like, okay, maybe.
Well, I mean, hey, it is time for the property to confess who it is and what it allows for,
Exactly. So that Reonomy ID and the NTD resolution, the machine learning system around that really is the crux of our core IP and differentiation. And then to your point, that's the nerdy part. And what we try to do is marry the nerdy and the complex on the back end with simple, elegant, intuitive solutions on the front end.
Yeah. And see, I'm so glad that you brought all this up, because I wanted to ask of like, hey, okay, so now going through the site, there's a lot more mention the mentioning of AI and machine learning is very front and center when I'm looking through the technology. And, to no fault of other startups who are aspirationally artificial intelligence or aspirational machine learning, as you mentioned, a lot of it is marketing hype. And, figuring out how to actually do those things with real estate data, it sounds difficult, but you guys have been working on it now for several years.
Yeah.
And part of that, this is what's created the Reonomy ID, and this is what enables you to do what really no other provider in the market currently is able to do, of like taking, even in Chicago here, taking, Chicago, I think Chicago County is one county. I'm still not from the area. And then you got Cook County, right? So you have the city and then surrounding city, and then marrying those together.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can actually do comparisons between the two.
Yep, exactly. And then, and what we stumbled on, and to your point, just to riff a little bit on that point around like other companies that, sprinkle AI and ML, absolutely. And I get it, right? I even said, right, I even confessed, we were sort of guilty of that 7-8 years ago. And you do it to sort of like get in the door, right? To sort of convince the CIO or CTO or whomever at the brokerage, at the big bank, at the insurance company or whatever. But you can only do that for so long, right? Because eventually, and we are finding this definitely over the last 12 to 18 months, and I think we're going to see that really emphasized now going forward, is that companies are really looking for true technology to sort of transform their data and to enhance their thing. And they are now savvy enough to know what's real and what's not, right? Because if I come in and I say, I can cleanse your data, normalize it, validate it, and your eyes light up, you're like, great, where has this been? I've just been spending millions of dollars trying to build my own system. It doesn't work. I have to maintain it, etc. I would love that solution. Sign me up. And I say, well, okay, great. I'll take a little bit of your data and I'll come back in 6, 8, 9, 10 weeks. That sounds suspicious, right? And whereas if you've got a complete API suite, you say, I've just, in this conversation, giving you a key. It's in your inbox. Here's the documentation. You can actually do it yourself. It's an open platform, and within minutes, you can bulk upload all your data. You maintain full ownership and custody of your data. We don't take the data. You're just hitting our APIs, and it has cleansed it and normalized it back to you. That's the kind of solution they want. And
that's a good litmus test. It's kind of like, shall we call it the Theranos test?
Yes, exactly. That's a great way of putting it.
If the instant blood test takes 6 weeks to calculate, it may not be instant.
Exactly. You actually articulated it really well. I'm going to use that going forward because
there you go. The Theranos test shall live on. That was not all for naught. I'm curious. So in some of your models, so right now we're a little bit of uncertain times. Interestingly enough, that is a trending term if you look it up on Google. Uncertain times.
Yes.
Down economy, up economy. Sometimes tools, when they're built, is considering the environment around them, and of course we have considerations, right? So a lot of people, like when I bought my first rental property in 2015, I had the consideration of, if the market drops 20-30%, can I pay my mortgage?
Yeah.
Like if I lose 20-30%, am I going to be underwater, or am I going to be cool? So I think a lot of people built those assumptions in. What we're facing is a little bit outside of what most would have factored into reasonable assumptions. How does Reonomy handle up economy and down economies? Does that change how your data set is structured, or are you built to withstand sudden changes?
Question, and as you said, a very topical one. It doesn't change how our data model and our data engine is structured. We've built it now in, as I mentioned, a flexible way that can ingest any data set, whether it's public or private, third party, et cetera. What we have seen change, though, are the use cases and the data that is requested or needed or helpful in a down economy. As an example, people are looking for distressed assets or signs of distress, right? So pre-foreclosure or foreclosure, tax arrears, tax trends, as an example, loan to value ratios, right? Given sales comps versus how much debt is on a property. Those are all things that we are seeing trending now on the platform in terms of usage. Whereas, when the sun's out, yes, of course, developers are always looking for that one asset that's sort of distressed that they can rehab or flip or do something. But usually rising tides lifts all ships. So they're saying, I don't have to worry as much about finding that one gem in a real bull market. But in those quote unquote uncertain times, it really places a premium on that type of data specifically. We found very saliently on our data set.
Yeah. I have so many like selfishly motivated questions to understand about like different markets and data, but I'm not
sign up. It's a free trial.
I think I've used one or two of those, but I'll try a different email.
Okay. You're one of those. Yeah, we know.
What? I mean, you could do some research here and there,
Friend of the family.
No, it's all good. So walk me through though, so we talked a little bit about the practical uses and obviously, especially if you're going to be leveraging Reonomy to the fullest capacity, it sounds like there's maybe a little bit of engineering required to access the data through
if you
API.
If you are a large company and you want access to our data feeds products or our intelligence systems products, data feeds is literally where you are hitting our APIs to ingest our data in bulk and augment your own view of the world. I liken it to widening your aperture, right? So
I like that.
I'm a brokerage firm, an insurance company, and lender. I want to know everything there is to know about every building and every market. Even though I'm not going to lend to a duplex, it helps me to know what the inventory around the multifamily that I'm lending to is, right? So you need engineering. And likewise, if you want to access our intelligence system, an example of that is that entity resolution, where if I'm a big brokerage firm and I have leasing databases, valuation and appraisal databases, capital markets databases, research databases, they are not linked. They are not relational. And so I need a way to link all of those databases on an ongoing automated basis. And that's where you can leverage our APIs to do that. But that does require engineering work. Now, we have, as I said, web-based solutions that don't require any engineering. And the users there range from, we have over 100,000 users who use just, that Zillow for commercial real estate. And then we've got professional versions of that. So if you're a team of 12 loan originators in the same office and each of you has access to Reonomy, you can collaborate, you can exchange notes, information, permissioning, et cetera, using the Reonomy for teams and the professional version.
And on that professional version, like those would be then, like as you mentioned, like leasing offices, maybe wholesale mortgage brokerages, your nationwide firms.
No, they can be regional. They can be regional. Yeah, definitely regionally focused. The nationwide firms, the really big ones, right? I'll just use banks as an example, right? The JP Morgans, the Citis, the Wells Fargos, those would tend to use those data and analytics products because they have the engineering resources. The 4,000 plus regional banks, right? The Bank of California, the TD Bank, et cetera, they tend to use the web professional version of it.
Got it.
Within specific offices.
Very cool. Yeah. So, and I think this is one of the things that stood out to me when I was first looking at Reonomy, because, there are some, I'm not going to put anybody on blast today. We'll be nice, but there are some services out there that, will say they do something similar, but I see what they're doing and they're really only appealing to the fix and flippers. And that's where I know like there's a very finite limit that they're going to, but I see why. And this probably explains, and we'll get to it a little bit later, talk about fundraising, but this explains why some of your investors see how much bigger the vision is and where Reonomy goes from here.
That's exactly right. They share our view at Reonomy that we really built the platform for commercial real estate. And what that really means is a series of applications and products that are built on a common data framework and model. Right? That's just a simple way of putting it. And so the same way you use Salesforce as a platform to solve your lead gen, contacts, companies, et cetera, you use Reonomy to solve your property intelligence needs. And whether it's you as a big bank building your own applications, using our data feeds and our intelligence systems, or whether it's you leveraging our own apps that are built on top of it, that Zillow-esque app as an example, there are myriad solutions that basically are all tied together around the Reonomy ID and that data model.
Yeah, I love it. I'm curious though. Not all markets are the same, especially when it comes to tech adoption.
Yep.
But it's been a few years now. You guys have worked and built a very, I think, recognizable brand. Are you seeing adoption range from geo-market to geo-market, or it kind of?
That's a really good question. And one, intuitively, I thought that and I actually had a cool board slide of what I thought was a cool nerdy board slide. It's like, well, it's
did it show dots all over the country?
Yeah. It's kind of like the movie Outbreak. A little topical, maybe a little too soon, but when it shows the virus spreading.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Well, don't see it. It's not worth seeing it right now.
Okay,
we're
good.
living it. And so I had two slides. The first slide, which was, here is a heat map of where all the Reonomy users are in whatever the date was, going back 5-6 years ago. And it was just a bubble on New York City, right? Because that's where all our users were, because we only had data on New York, right?
Yeah.
And so only really regionally, locally focused folks there. And then I had, a few months later, here's a heat map of where all the users are. And it was literally everywhere, right? And maybe North Dakota didn't have a bubble or something like that at that
That's
time.
a bummer. What about Montana? That's my mug today.
Probably had a bubble. And that has definitely accelerated over time. And so if you were to paint a heat map of where all our users are, essentially the entire country would be painted in that. And what we found is that, again, there's a little bit of the democratization of data, where historically this type of data, this type of analytics has really been only for the top of the pyramid, those full-time professionals who work at the big banks, the big brokerage firms, who can afford the 5, maybe 6, in some cases 7 figures a year to pay for this type of data and analytics, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But what if I'm a mom and pop developer or residential broker who aspires to be commercial, what we call resi-mercial brokers, or even a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, who is interested in potentially buying a multifamily, because I heard from my buddies that that's a good way to make money, a safe new way. Where do I go there? And it doesn't matter if you're in, a secondary, tertiary, or large market, you still have that same need and interest, et cetera. And so we've found really broad-based adoption across this, what we consider to be a massively underserved long tail of users. And there's millions of these people who are potentially interested in the broadly defined world of commercial real estate.
I love it. And that's so cool to hear, you've been able to, obviously the enterprise probably sticks around where those big corporate offices are, but then you have this, as listed on the site, the professional level web app available. Yep. So you don't have to be a data scientist to be able to leverage the data to understand what you should be trying to pivot or how to, manipulate it. You can look at it and get something that's actionable.
You nailed it.
Love it. That's cool. I do appreciate data that's more than just vanity metrics. Charts and graphs are fun and they're great and they're impressive on presentations. And you can make a chart and graph, make it look like it's something, but if it's,
you can make it look really pretty.
Yeah. But if it's not actionable data, if there's nothing you can take away of what should I be doing with this,
totally.
It's particularly empty. I want to talk about branding for a minute though, because obviously I'm a marketing guy. It's something that I'm interested in. I don't do my professional career has not been heavy on the branding side. I'm very much a direct consumer, direct response type marketer.
Yeah.
But you guys, as I've mentioned, you've taken something kind of nerdy and you've made it cool. And there's very intentional branding marks and styles that I pick up on and I'm looking at when I'm looking at different companies. And I've admired Reonomy on how you guys have done that over the last few years, even just, I would say the last, year and a half or so. I've seen a remarkable tightening of that. First off, what drove that? Because I could see you guys are venture backed. So growing consumer base is very important, and it doesn't always come with building a big brand. It's usually just optimize the funnel, just get people in.
Exactly. Yeah. And
yeah.
it's a really important, but yet often overlooked and subtle point. And it goes back to, I think, what I said, where our investors, especially in the Series C and Series D, the ones, we did a Series D late last year, Series C the year before, they really invested with the belief that we had building this platform, the system of record for this massive asset class. And if that's the case, and if you believe that and you have conviction, then it really is a matter of you are building a company of consequence, and it doesn't matter what your revenue ends up being this year or next year. You're building for the next 3, 5, 10 years in that vision, right? And if that's the case, and if you have that fundamental belief, and we're very meticulous in finding the right partnership with our investors. Because some investors, you speak to them and they look at the metrics and say, yeah, this is really exciting. I see the growth, and like, yeah, you should take more money and you can double the burn, and you'll, more than double the top line, and let's just really go for it. And it's all about the SaaS metrics and all that stuff, to your point, top of funnel.
Yep.
To me, they are missing the point about us as a company. And so our current set of investors, our board, myself, our execs, all are centered around that belief, around that big platform for that massive asset class. And in order to build that, much more important than sort of real top of funnel. That's still important, right? It pays the bills and you've got to grow.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But more important for the long-term strategy is that notion of brand with a capital B. What do you stand for? How do you take what you're doing, your mission, your vision, distill it in a way that's easily understandable, not just for the large companies, but also that mid-market and those long tails of individuals. And so that really is why branding is so important for us. And we've really reaffirmed that over the last, as you mentioned, 12 to 18 months.
I'd say, probably the takeaway there for other founders who might be listening is have this story before the metrics. Is that the takeaway? I mean,
Absolutely.
You have to know who you are and what you're doing. You can't have
the story without the metrics, right? So it's kind of like this double-edged sword, or you two sides of the same coin. You definitely have to have the story before the metrics, because that really is that's the nucleus. And depending on what stage you're at, look, seed, Series A, even Series B, you can have mostly story and sort of have aspirational metrics and sort of sell the dream, so to speak. But at some point, the metrics, which really means the markets, right? The dogs are eating the dog food. That is the litmus test of like that your story is one that really resonates, right? Because if it only resonates on paper, only resonates to you or even to your investor, then that's not okay. That's not a sign of a big business either.
Yeah. No, I think that's some really good advice. I mean, you hear a lot about story, but what does it matter? What does it look for? And clearly what, for you guys, like it's showing that you're not just this is for commercial broker business.
Right.
It's not just for the guy who wants to buy real estate, or it's not just for the brokerage who wants to sell real estate. This is much bigger, making commercial real estate asset class accessible to all businesses, because it impacts, well, literally all businesses.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And I did not realize that when I founded the company, just how ubiquitous, this could and this would become, because you nailed it, right? Like who, and as an individual, and what business is not impacted by commercial real estate?
Yeah. No, I get it. You kind of shared earlier a little bit about something that hadn't worked early on, which was, trying to take the New York model and copying it over to LA. I'm curious if you've got another story in there of something you guys tried that maybe failed. You don't have to go failed miserably, but if you got one, that
was a bad one. I like the joke that with that one, I had a nice luscious head of hair like you did, and then that happened, and then this is the result.
Maybe I haven't been working hard enough. That's why I got all this hair yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's the case, but you want another failure. All right, let me see. Look, this is less around like a big dramatic failure and more around a fail fast mindset that we do have. One thing that I am not a commercial real estate expert. I did not grow up in a commercial real estate family. I did not have a job in commercial real estate. I wasn't a broker. I wasn't an investor or developer or anything like that. Like a lot of other quote unquote prop tech founders are, right? They live the pain and they said, oh, well, I want to build a solution to solve it. But as a result, I've just been a lifelong entrepreneur. But as a result, what I have done personally and what we have done as a firm is really place this customer at the center of what we do and put in front of them what it is we're trying to build, right? And really early on with wireframes, designs, not trying to spend too much expensive engineering resources building something for several months or quarters or even longer, and then saying, hey, here it is, do you like it? And then telling you no, and you've wasted all that time and money and resources. No, you put designs in front of them and you solicit feedback, good, bad, and ugly. And so we have scores of, wireframe designs, ideas that we have put in front of our customer groups, right? We have an advisory council. We can A/B test a lot of this now because of all those users that we have. And they have completely sort of thrown up all over it and said, this is just terrible. Now, obviously, there's a lot of things that they've said, this is great, and they've made their way into the product or have become standalone products over time. But, to some extent, you've got to train yourself to have that thick skin and not take it personally and not say, oh, no, actually, you don't understand. This is how you use it. No, if they don't understand, then that's the full stop, right? You've got to take that as the feedback and go back to the drawing board. So our mindset really is of we call it failing fast, so that you put it out there, you get the feedback, you listen to the feedback, you accept the feedback, and you iterate on that. And if that means that some stuff goes to the sort of proverbial graveyard or product development, that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Was that something that came out of discussions with VCs asking, do you talk to your customers, or was that always a mindset that you had early on?
No, it's always been a mindset. And as I said, I think it was born out of the fact that I knew what I didn't know. And that was most everything as it relates to commercial real estate. And so I needed to talk to the loan originators at JP Morgan. I needed to talk to the investment sales brokers at Cushman Wakefield, the developers, the analysts at Tishman Speyer, in order to get that feedback and that knowledge that I did not have firsthand.
Yeah, because I would agree. The common story is I tried to do this thing, I didn't have a better way, and so then I resolved to fix it
myself. And
to build it myself. And I think with a lot of real estate,
I'm not knocking that. That works.
Yeah, it's hard to be in the prop tech vertical, if you will, without having had real estate experience, because there's just nuances and there's just ways that things are done and reasons why no one has built something to complete it. But it sounds like, possibly like your non-experience in real estate, but openness to research.
It did. It
helped.
It was a bit, yes. In our case, it did help. It also helped in a sense that I did not come with the baggage or preconceived notion of certain things won't work, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And let's face it, right? Commercial real estate, yes, it's gone through peaks and troughs, but as an asset class, a lot of people have been making a lot of money for a long time in commercial real estate. So they might not, see the need to innovate or challenge the status quo.
Yeah. And so like, I would use this as an example. Like I would start saying like, okay, finding a type of building is great. Anybody can find a type of building, but how do you know it's like the up and coming neighborhood? It's it's the neighborhood that's not up and coming. Like, did a Whole Foods close 3 months ago? Okay, what does that tell you about the asset class in the area, or who's leaving the area, or what the changes are, and does that fit your investment model? Like some of those things. Like I would look for that. I would look for some Whole Foods, probably Trader Joe's, a Starbucks.
Soul Cycle.
Yeah,
perfect Venn diagram of
all the millennial avocado toast eating lovers.
Exactly.
But that's just my type of neighborhood. Okay, so let's talk, if we can. I'd love to go into fundraising just a little bit. So I think you guys have kind of broken out away from the pack of prop tech. And I don't want to say because you're not prop tech, but you've really definitely established yourselves as a leader in the category beyond your fundraising. But fundraising has been definitely one of those factors to say like, hey, Reonomy is doing something different. Crunchbase, I don't know how accurate it is, says 128 million raised today.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. Yeah, I think it's a shade under 130.
That is a boatload of cash.
Yes.
Can you share with me your fundraising strategy, or some of your, like, how you look at fundraising?
Yeah. Well, fundraising should be a means to an end. Fundraising should not be done just as a vanity play or as a way to sort of one up anything. So we've always done it. I've always done it in a deliberate fashion and said, okay, well, let's raise not when we need to, because then you're not in a really position of strength, but let's always have conversations with smart, like-minded investors on an ongoing basis. Let's tell them about our business. Let's a little bit call our shots, right? Say we're going to hit a home run that way. And then lo and behold, you hit two. And they follow you over several months and quarters and even years, right? And as they see your vision sharpen and crystallize and come to fruition, right? That's where the magic happens. And you have these like-minded folks where it ends up being organic, right? The way I liken it is almost like meeting somebody, on a date organically, right? In the library or the supermarket or wherever. I've been married now for a long time and with my wife for over 20 years, so I don't know where people meet. Or versus doing it on a dating app, right? Which is much more, you're doing it for that purpose, and the analogy
expectations have already been set.
Exactly. And again, that is a means to an end, and that is a fine way of doing it. And the analogy on the fundraising is you run a process, right? You've got your hit list of 20, 30 firms. You've got your pitch deck. You present to everyone. You get feedback. You go to the second round at some of them, and then you find your 2 to 3 who will offer a term sheet. You negotiate. You sign one term sheet, and then boom, you're done. We've never done that. We've always done it where we have these long-term relationships that we've built with a very select, curated set of investors, right? These are investors who we believe understand our vision, our mission, and who we believe we can learn from as well, right? Who can enhance and sharpen that. So the fundraising, whether it's our Series B led by Bain Capital, our Series C led by Sapphire Ventures, SAP's venture arm, or whether it's our Series D led by Georgian Partners, a large VC firm up in Canada, and a number of banks who participated as well, Wells Fargo, Citi, a few others. It's always been this sort of organic coming together of the minds and saying, hey, imagine what we could do if we raise the money now in order to invest in our R&D and the core IP that we have. And so that's where really, as I mentioned, that Series D came about late last year. Now, I'm very fortunate that it came about then, right? Because I did not have a crystal ball knowing that there'd be a global pandemic that would, at the very least, be a pretty strong headwind through fundraising. Now, companies will still fundraise, but it's going to make it tougher. So we're fortunate to be in the position we're in, for sure.
When preparation meets opportunity, right there.
Yes. There we go.
Everyone wants to experience a little bit of luck, and certainly in business, I think anybody will agree that there's some luck that happens, but the luck doesn't happen to those who are unprepared. I think you were having those conversations.
And that was our version of the preparation. Exactly. Just having those relationships. So it wasn't, we weren't sort of caught on our heels.
Yeah. Totally. I appreciate that. I think that's, there's a lot packed in there. I think for people to think through. And obviously I think the narrative of the last year or so has changed a little bit. The tone has changed a little bit on fundraising and what it means to raise a lot of money and why to do it, or should you do it. Of course, I think Andreessen's newest post kind of hit, a handful of people have hit hard on the Blitzscaling methodology lately of, hey, is this the right thing right now? Should we be going that path? And I don't hear any of that coming from you of, hey, we're just Blitzscaling. We are spending to grow at all costs.
No. I've always been adverse to that. We've always been very fiscally conservative, financially conservative. And just to hammer the point, when we raised our Series D, we hadn't spent any of our Series C money. And that was a $30 million round. So we truly didn't need the capital. The reason we did it, again, was to reaffirm this belief in our platform, and also to make this the last round we need to raise. So we don't really, we are operating and running the business as though we do not need to take another round of private funding unless we choose to, or we go to the debt market or whatever it is. But that is our mindset, and that informs every decision we make.
Good on you guys. That's awesome. Got a war chest ready to roll.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to shift here. We're going to go into the bottom of the show segments. This is my favorite part of the show. Rich, this is what I call For the Future. This is a segment where I get to ask each guest who comes to the show to give their best predictions based on the following 4 questions. Rich, you ready to play?
I am ready, although in this day and age, predictions I think are even harder. So I feel like I am on the double hot seat in this case.
It's all good. You got this. First one here. What's Reonomy look like 1 year from now?
I mean, yeah, as I said, that is a tough one. You and I were talking about this on the pre-show. A lot more virtual, right? I mean, we are headquartered, or were headquartered. I don't even know what to say anymore, in New York City. And so we made the decision to go fully remote almost 2 months ago now, when it really started to pick up in New York. And, with this new normal and having to have really strict social distancing, disinfection, et cetera, up until there's a vaccine, in a year from now, I think we will still be at least mostly remote, maybe with a small office presence with some you sign up for slots when you can go in, but I know that's not a business thing, but that is very top of mind for me as a CEO right now. And so that's probably how I'd answer that question.
All right. Question number 2, what will prop tech as an industry look like a year from now?
Good question again. And as you mentioned, if you were to listen to Mike Beckerman, prop tech as an industry right now doesn't exist anymore, right? And I think there's something to that. I think what he means by that is, look, and we talked about it, I don't think you called anyone out, but there are a lot of companies that have sprouted out and gotten funding in the broadly defined prop tech market over the last few years that are not viable, sustainable, scalable businesses.
Sure.
Full stop.
Yeah.
Right? They do not have the right unit economics. They do not really have product market fit. They have good marketing, good branding, but it is not a scalable business. And so I think what this crisis is going to precipitate is the sort of culling of the herd, to be a little draconian. So I think that prop tech as an industry will be massively rationalized, and there will be a rising, as I said, rationalization and a rising to the top of a select few number of companies that really are viable sort of companies that I guess you don't have to label as prop tech anymore. They're just solutions. They're just platforms. They're just, whatever they are within the real estate space.
I have to share with you, I sometimes create visuals as someone is speaking to help reinforce what they're saying. And as you were saying that, I thought of curds and whey.
Oh, there you go.
So
there you
the successful prop tech companies will have formed into curds, will then enter the deep fryer and become delicious treats for all, while the whey is just off to the side. There it is.
Yes. There you go. Wow.
There you go. Question number 3. What's one industry trend you think will continue, but you wish would go away?
That is a good question. That I think will. Look, I do think that there will still be some resistance to adoption, because certain folks within large companies almost politicize tech and cast it with a stigma and data. And you see this in large companies where, if it's somebody's project or somebody brought, company X in and they are no longer there, then the next person will say, well, we should get rid of this just because it was, his or her thing. And that's true for every industry. That's true for most every solution. And I just don't think that's going to go away in commercial real estate. It's not going to go away in other industries either. And as a guy who historically has never liked the politicization of business, whether it's like how you climb up the corporate ladder because you latch onto the right person or you're in good graces, I wish that would go away, because to me it's just deeply inefficient.
All right. And number 4 here, for the future, what's one thing you believe will dramatically change or fade away in real estate as a result of tech advances?
Yeah, look, I think it's just as much tech advances as well as what we're going through. And I sort of alluded to it with us personally. I think office space is going to be dramatically reimagined. It has to, especially in large markets, in large buildings, right? You cannot socially distance in an elevator where you're inches away from, over a dozen strangers potentially, right? Every day, right? And then you can't have a bullpen of, 50 inside sales reps sitting, elbow to elbow. That just won't work anymore. Again, up until we will have a vaccine that's widely adopted and used and efficient and efficacious. But that might take years, right? So I think office specifically, but same applies to retail and others, but office will have to undergo a fundamental reimagining starting now.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if you follow Gerard Peleg,
Yes.
his work on reimagining his book Reimagine, I think rethinking real estate. But he's been sharing a ton of I think valuable insights on this very topic, and I think the writing is very clear, if you will, that a lot has to be totally reimagined, rethought.
Has to.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move into the last three. Rich, these are questions for our listeners to get to know you better. First one is, what are you reading?
Right now, I'm reading an awful lot of news. I probably shouldn't, but that is mostly what I'm reading. And I'm reading a lot of kids' books to my kids before bed. That's really what's consuming my time.
Love it. Question number two, who are you learning from?
That's a good question. And I mentioned it a few times over the past hour or so. I've learned a ton from our investors, my board specifically. We've got a really great group of investors, and Mike, who's from Bain Capital, he's been with us through thick and thin, right through that OS moment, right in LA, and learned a ton from him over the years in terms of how to just dispassionately think about the business in a very objective, rational, measured way versus, to your point, get carried away by fads, trends, what others are doing, blitz growth or everything. And that's been invaluable to me.
Yeah. Last one here. What inspires you?
This might sound cheesy, but it's very true. I have been inspired by the way our 130 plus, Reonomists have sort of really risen to the challenge of going fully remote while still running a big and growing business. That has been absolutely inspiring to see. And I've also been inspired of how they've lifted each other's spirits when one sees that the other might be, going through a tough time or a little down or, missing their home or their office or their camaraderie. Yeah. It's been amazing seeing that sort of play out before my digital screen over the last month or two.
That's very cool. Rich, before we close out, hey, first, thank you so much for your time and for sharing what Reonomy's been up to, where you guys have been going. Congrats to you guys on the success you've been having. It's been fun to watch, especially since the first time, we had Sam represent you guys on Tech Nest. I don't ever like to say it's because you guys were on the show, but it does seem to line up.
Correlation is causation.
It's just one of those attribution challenges.
Yeah.
But before we close out, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about Reonomy, what are the best ways for them to do that?
So for Reonomy, we've got a great site with a lot of information on it. And as I said, anyone can sign up for a free trial with no credit card required or anything like that. Reonomy.com. Super easy. There's also phone numbers, to reach. And if they want to reach out to me, easy. Rich@reonomy.com. Always love to hear from folks, whether it's entrepreneur, folks in the industry. As I said, I've lost my hair doing a lot of this. So I'm happy to impart whatever sort of scar tissue.
Been working hard, man. That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I really appreciate this. And I'm sure once all the restrictions loosen up, I have to make a trip to New York. So I'd love to be able to swing by and meet you and maybe see some of the team and all that. Once
meeting in person sounds great right about now.
Sounds so good, man. Yeah, I'm going to go in debt for all the drinks I owe people.
I know, exactly. Yes.
Well, let's keep in touch. And until then, thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening to the TechNest podcast. Hey, don't forget you can get on the email list so you never miss an upcoming episode. That's technest.io. That's technest.io. Get on the email list. Go to the App Store, whether you found us on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you found us. Leave us a 5-star review and share it with your friends. And if you've got a guest or someone that you'd like to recommend, or if you think that you'd be a great guest on the show, hey, send me an email, nate@realteampanda.com. That's nate@realteampanda.com. See you guys later.